When I think of gangsters, I think about one specific scene from my childhood.
How much do I owe you?
AC said 10%.
Too bad AC ain't in charge no more.
What do you mean?
I'm gonna give you to the count of 10 to get your ugly, yellow, no-good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead.
Terrifying. Like, who was AC and what was that 10% for? Anywho, that's what I think of. And based off of the countless stories throughout the time of Prohibition, and hell, even up to modern day, that was pretty accurate of how business could be done. So join me on this episode as we descend into the criminal underworld with Al Capone, Johnny Torrio, Lucky Luciano, and a bunch of other dudes with names that remind you that these Italian-made men weren't messing around. So grab your trench coat, your Tommy gun, and your drink, and let's go bust some kneecaps. But remember, snitches get stitches. Hey, before we begin, if anyone watching this actually happens to be in the Mafia, in no way possible am I seeking to denigrate your world or judge your livelihood, so please don't send AC to, kill me. Okay, thanks, bye. We're gonna kick this show off with a name that you know, Scarface. But I'm not talking about the fictional made-up drug boss. I'm talking about the real Scarface. None other than Big Al, AKA Public Enemy Number 1, AKA Al Capone, AKA Scarface. Born in New York City in 1899 to Italian immigrant parents, Al Capone basically came out of the womb as a mafia-made man. His meteoric rise within the mafia ranks was likely attributed to his street smarts, his ruthlessness, his likability, all traits necessary for navigating the criminal underworld, but most importantly, staying alive. Capone had them all in his spades. So, like most youths,
To what? Did you say Utes?
So like most youths looking to make a name for themselves as new criminals, he joined a crew. Capone became a card-carrying member of the 5 Points gang in Chicago. He became a bouncer of sorts, serving in organized criminal enterprises like brothels and gambling halls. He earned the respect of his peers, and he eventually caught the eye of Johnny Torrio. Now, Torrio is a name you need to know. He was a major crime boss in Chicago. With nicknames like the Fox and the Brain, he was also referred to, and I quote from the US Treasury, as the smartest and best of all the hoodlums. Torrio was the kind of guy you wanted to know and the kind of boss you wanted to work for. So when he offered a promotion to a young and hungry Al Capone, Capone jumped at the opportunity to be his protege. Torrio's first job for Capone was simple. He was a bartender at one of Torrio's joints on Coney Island. It was called the Harvard Inn. At the Harvard Inn, Capone expanded his professional network, making himself indispensable and learning the ins and outs of criminal enterprise. Capone then quickly climbs the ladder and becomes Torrio's right-hand man. So much so that after a rival attempt on Torrio, in which Torrio was shot 7 times, Torrio decides to retire, but not before handing over the entire operation to a young Capone. Now, the size of Torrio's operation when he retired, it can't be overstated. It was the equivalent of around $1 billion in today's money. So at the tender age of 26, Capone took the reins. And much like the savvy investors of today, Capone took a holistic approach to having a properly diversified portfolio. Instead of NFTs, crypto, and meme stocks, #OneLambo, Capone aggressively expanded into wholesome asset classes like illegal gambling, loan sharking, extortion, protection rackets, drug trafficking, labor racketeering, contract assassinations, and most importantly, running booze. Fun fact, the term bootlegger actually comes from the practice of American frontiersmen who carried bottles of illicit liquor in the tops of their boots. This is how the Mafia made trucks of money, and this is how the wars of Prohibition began. So with that, let's kick off our first drink. Now, it's believed that Al Capone was partial to the Southside Gin Fizz. Evidently, the gin sold by the Capone crew, also known as the Southside Gang, was harsher than the other stuff on the market, so they had to cut it with more ingredients. Like most of the stories surrounding the cocktails we create here on Black Tie Cocktail Guy, the story could be completely bogus. So is this one true? I don't know. But I sure as hell ain't gonna question the American Mafia or accuse them of lying. Thus, the Southside Gin Fizz was born. That's good. All right. So, now back to Prohibition. It's worth mentioning Prohibition practically created organized crime. Before Prohibition, most of these mafia types just made money threatening assault or death to people that didn't pay up. But now, the government had provided the American Mafia with justification to create a brand new vertical market. All of a sudden, these guys were making so much money, they actually needed accountants, lawyers, brewmasters, boat captains, truckers, warehousemen, and goons needed to intimidate, injure, and or kill the competition. So while Capone and his crew had Chicago locked down, let's hop over to New York. Now, we just arrived in Grand Central Station, and we're looking for a drink in a place where alcohol is still illegal. Now, naturally, in modern day, you'd assume we need to know a guy who knows a guy to get into a speakeasy. But that's completely false. Speakeasies were the worst kept secret of their time. First off, in the 1920s, there were over 32,000 of them in New York alone. Secondly, they often had a green door, which was meant to alert the patrons that there was booze being sold just behind that door. And access could easily be gained because the very cops hired to be on the lookout for the illegal saloons were on the mafia payroll, paid specifically to look the other way. So we head to a local joint with the green door to hear some jazz or big band music and let it be known to the waitress that we're interested in some sauce. A couple minutes later, we're escorted to another part of the upstanding establishment where the real fun begins. We asked what they have on hand because frankly, the market fluctuated. Sometimes it was bathtub gin or poorly distilled whiskey, and while we could certainly order a stiff and neat drink, we wouldn't dare because it could have literally tasted like paint remover. But the question remains, how did the booze get into the club? Well, since we're in New York, there's a good chance that Charles Lucky Luciano had something to do with it. So what did Lucky actually drink? Well, like any cartel boss, he rarely, if ever, used his own product. So I wasn't able to find any trademark drink that he used to enjoy while discussing his growing empire of illegal booze distribution. So we're gonna have to rely on Hollywood for this one. Back in 2011, HBO worked with Basil Haynes to develop signature cocktails inspired by the hit series Boardwalk Empire, of which Lucky was a prominent character. One of these drinks was called Lucky's Manhattan, a slight spin on the classic that's easy to make and it's really good. So let's get to it. That's good. That's good. All right, so you might not be surprised to learn that Lucky was actually really lucky, and that he didn't end up like most mob bosses, docked off or in prison. He died of a heart attack in Naples, Italy. But as for the long-term success of speakeasies, well, they had a good run up until 1933 as the 21st Amendment once again allowed people to legally enjoy alcohol again. So there you have it. A quick peek at the intersection of the mafia, prohibition, and how we have both of them to thank for modern day cocktail culture. Until next time, friends. Cheers. That's good. That's still good.